All right. This is the second interview, and I'm here with goosSSB.
What's up?
I'm curious. What are your current positions on inputs in fighting games? How do you feel about them?
Um, well, by inputs you mean like specific inputs for like special moves?
Yeah, like command inputs in fighting games.
Got you, got you. Um, I think I'm definitely like a fan of them.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people would say that they're a barrier to entry, right?
Yeah.
Um, but really, all all like movement, and I mainly play Smash.
Mm-hmm.
All movement in Smash is very similar to a command input,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Like indirectly, yeah, it is.
Like particularly movement in melee is I would say just as strict, and you need to kind of depend on it as much, right?
Yeah. I'd even say stricter. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
I
fair.
agree with that.
So I would say it's pervasive
Mm-hmm.
in fighting games in general. There's obviously exceptions, but like in order to have a fighting game, you need strict timings. So I think that command inputs are ultimately a good thing. I like them.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good like skill check, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. I would agree with that. Uh, I'm very pro inputs as well. I'm a huge
Nice.
fan of them. So yeah, when I did
I
my
do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Uh, it's all right.
I was just gonna say that I like the way they handle Terry and Smash because you have easy special moves, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like anyone can play them, and Smash is a party game. You know,
Yeah.
it needs that mass appeal,
Mm-hmm.
but it does less damage, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's cool. I think you could get just more out of doing a command input. You could kind of lower the barrier to entry, but if you want
Mm-hmm.
to like play a game seriously, then you kind of need to sit down and learn them and master them and whatnot.
Yeah. I get that. I actually like. I agree with that quite a bit. Uh, there's a game that did it pretty similar to how Terry's handled in Smash, and it's called Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. Came out this year.
Mm-hmm.
And it handles inputs in a very interesting way. It plays a lot more like Street Fighter, and you can do inputs regularly, but the special moves are called skills because it's based off of a mobile game, right? Where there's
Okay.
like cooldowns and stuff, right? So
Yeah.
when you do the input, there's no cooldown for your move, but if you don't do the input and just use the one button special move, there's a cooldown, and that's a pretty interesting way of handling it.
Yeah. I like that.
It's
That's
a
pretty cool.
direct trade off.
I've heard a lot of good things about that game.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Worst thing about it is the net code. That's every fighting game.
Yeah. Well, that's fair.
Yeah.
Um, again, I think that goes back to you kind of have like to weigh doing an input or not doing an input and doing less damage, or like you just said, not doing an input and having a cooldown.
Yeah.
Um, so I think what the mechanics are saying is that an input is inherently hard to do. It's a negative to have to do an input to do a move
Hmm.
because you could mess it up, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
Um, but with that, it's like a risk reward, pretty much.
Yeah. Like inputs aren't inherently like non-intuitive and like more difficult than like pressing a button, right? But
Mhm.
the reward for doing an input is greater, and I think like especially like when they were introduced, like there was a huge like trade-off for not doing an input and doing an input, right? But
Yeah,
now as like things have gotten easier and there's been more like direct parallels and just things are becoming a little bit easier. Uh,
yeah,
the 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 trade off for not doing an input is a it's a lot less painful, but doing an input is still always preferred, and I think I like that.
yeah.
I think I do like that.
I definitely don't mind it. I think that in terms of the things you have to get good at to be good at a fighting game, um, inputs are like actually, in my opinion, on the lower end.
Yeah, I agree.
There's definitely like
I agree.
I don't know. There's crazy stuff. There's like your weird Soul Calibur like 50 input whatever
Hmm.
craziness, but then like you've got your regular like quarter circles and whatnot. Um, but it's I think those are easier to learn and more consistent once you've learned them compared to like making a read or like actually playing good neutral and boxing and all that.
Yeah.
It's a good like I don't know, it's a good way to get paid off for like learning something and having it be like really obvious to you.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
if you learn
Hmm.
to read well, you'll notice every once in a while, but if you learn to do a command input, it's very apparent, you know?
Yeah. Like the like the direct like visual stimulus to seeing to seeing an input happen is a lot greater, and I think that on its
Yep.
own can be like can also be like pretty encouraging to like want to learn inputs as well. But
Yeah.
I like as I think about inputs like more and more, like I do think they are becoming even more necessary. Because I've played a lot of games now that like don't have inputs, and because in their goal was to not necessarily lessen the skill gap, but to overall make it easier to get to the meat of fighting games, because the meat of fighting games isn't like actually inputs, right? It's the
Hmm.
stuff around inputs. Inputs in that way are a barrier. I don't think they are necessary, but they are a barrier in that aspect.
Yeah. I think everything's a barrier to entry in some regards, just a matter of how easy it is to
Hmm.
overcome it,
Yeah,
right? And I think that like that's a good starting barrier to entry. Like you have to really learn to do this,
yeah,
and then you're rewarded. It's like, oh wow, I want to do that more now.
yeah. There's definitely merit to like to still keeping that barrier of entry. Like,
Hmm.
I know one of my more favorite games that I've played like doesn't have inputs is the Power Rangers game, and it's really interesting because
Nice.
that game is it plays like Marvel vs. Capcom, right? But the the difference is in a game like Marvel, inputs are not like as big of a barrier as they are in other games because you're doing a whole bunch of damage without inputs anyway, and you're usually doing inputs for like special enders or like for extending a combo. So
Okay.
with a game like Power Rangers, it trades those inputs off with like directions and a button, and it still
Hmm.
feels like I'm playing Marvel in that aspect because I'm not because like
Interesting.
inputs are not like the major arc of the system. It's really just the buttons and your timing with them.
Huh. I've never heard something like that.
Oh,
That's very interesting.
it's a really good game. It's a really good game. It has great netcode and crossplay between all platforms. It's really good.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah, yeah. I think the way that game handled inputs is pretty interesting. DBFZ also like it doesn't have like DP inputs, right? It's just like
Hmm.
fireballs, and
Yeah.
that like to me that was like way less of a big deal. I To me it started becoming like way more annoying when they had to like limit character designs because they could only have like up to like four moves because everything had to be a input, right? So
Yeah, it had to be dedicated to a button.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it became sort of limiting at that point. But I think that's where like another facet of inputs comes in where it's like making a new input adds a new move, right? Like
Hmm. Yeah.
doing a 360 motion. It's not the same as like pressing doing like a 360 motion for like a grab. It's not the same as like pressing the two button grab. There's an obvious
Yeah.
difference between them.
Yeah. You gain controller real estate, and by extension, get to have uh, a wider, varied, um, like character move list and whatnot.
Hmm. It creates more
And
variety inherently
yeah,
when you have more different inputs.
yeah. When you have more variety, you have more mix-ups, and your game gets a lot deeper.
Yeah,
So it's definitely. I didn't even think of that. It's definitely another good reason to have it.
yeah, and like also when I was also like researching inputs, like originally they were created as like a way to like have like they were only made to have something that looks cool. That was their initial purpose. It was only like in Street Fighter One, they had inputs, and it was only to make things look cool. In Street
Hmm.
Fighter Two,
Really?
when they made inputs more important because neutral now revolves around inputs, right?
Yeah.
Inputs gained a new purpose, which was balancing as well,
Hmm.
and because it obviously takes time to do an
Yeah.
input, right? So you can't like you can't spam a fireball as fast as you can just like press a button. You
Hmm.
can't crank out DPs as fast as you can by like
Yeah.
pressing like crouching heavy punch, right?
The faster you go for an input, the more likely you are to mess it up.
Yeah. And when they created like the distinctions between like doing a crouching heavy punch anti-air and like a DP anti-air, the DP has invincibility and has a faster startup, right? It's
Hmm.
gonna trade a whole lot less and it's gonna
Nice.
beat out more moves. And that was like the way they incentivized inputs at a higher level because back then like inputs were not the standard.
Huh.
It made things deeper. Like you think about it now, but like there's like back then like there are probably stages like that they took where like people probably didn't do inputs that much in like the first couple like weeks or months of the game,
Yeah.
and eventually like the people started to like understand why inputs are important more, and stuff like that is like kind of cool to think about.
Yeah. I can't imagine being like the first guy to like get like Shoryuken down or something.
Yeah, and, like start DPing everything like must
Yeah.
have been interesting.
Be be the guy at the arcade. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I.
That's
Mm-hmm.
a lot like in the early days of Melee, uh, directional influence was
Oh
like
yeah.
kind of like brought over from Japan. Like people in the States didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So people would like from Japan would show up and they'd play these heavy characters and they would live forever. And like
Yeah.
nobody got it. So it's interesting the way like a meta can evolve.
Yeah, like I wonder like what like the early tiers were because like in Melee like characters like Bowser and like DK were like more popular early on because uh people didn't like understand like how DI worked and how like other mechanics worked, so
Hmm.
like they saw DI as like they saw it as like a very like blanket mechanic where it was like okay you DI you live longer, so obviously the heavier characters are better, right? It
Hmm.
ended up not being the case, but it's interesting. Depth
Yep.
was found more and more as time progressed.
Yeah, definitely. That's another example like Smash DI where you want to DI in multiple like kind of divots on the controller.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely another input. It's not really a command input necessarily, but it's like the inverse of it. You instead of gaining more damage, you take less damage, or you get out of a combo, or kind of mix up where you're going.
Yeah,
But it's not really like put in the game the way a command input is.
yeah. Like I think they both have like in terms of like conception, they have like the same purpose. Like they were put in the game to do something. They're a input that you do in order to do something specific.
Mm-hmm.
But like their implementation is very different, and I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It's not something you might think about. It's definitely not a surface level thing for a fighting game,
Yeah,
either.
it's like inputs are like they go very deep, and like I've been thinking like I was playing Street Fighter and like I was thinking like about the character Ed, and he is a character who has no command inputs in Street Fighter, right? So
Really?
yeah, the way you do his moves,
No command inputs.
no inputs except for a super. That's
Huh.
it.
Huh. Okay.
So
Go
the
on.
way that you do his special moves is you press two buttons. So he has a like uppercut move with both punches and a DP like move with both kicks, and like a fireball by doing forward and a button and then pressing the button again, in order to like have that like in order to balance it because a one button fireball would be weird and probably
Yeah.
like very good, right? So you have to you have to do the first hit and then press the button again, so it takes time. So it
Okay.
comes out
This is the
slower
trade-off.
than a fireball. Yeah, it's a trade off. Like
Okay. Okay.
it's like think of Incineroar like side B grab, except
I'm
like
always thinking of Incineroar.
yeah, but instead of like pressing the button when you get the grab, like you can make the hit come out immediately, but by pressing the button instantly.
Huh. Okay. I like that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so Ed, he's a very different character in terms of design because obviously he has no inputs, right? So they balance him out in other ways. His moves are way laggier, and they're also like way more
Hmm.
committal than like a regular DP.
I imagine he's not the best character.
He's pretty good, but you play him
Really?
differently. Yeah,
Really? Not yes.
you gotta play him differently.
Okay.
But
Huh.
yeah, like even down to like how combos work for him, like his execution barrier is way lower directly. But what I found is like when I try to get new players to play the game, they liked Ed initially, but once they like
Yeah.
experimented with other characters, they grew to like understand why others are more important, and they found
Hmm.
like their niches. I'd say
Yeah. I
Ed.
was gonna ask
Mm-hmm.
if Ed is fun to play. If
Ed,
I imagine he is,
yeah,
right?
he's pretty fun to play. He has some pretty
If he's
cool
fun to
stuff.
play and he's not the worst character and he doesn't have inputs, wouldn't that be an argument against them?
Yeah, I could see that. Like with Ed, he like instead of like being like a direct translation of like a Shoto with no inputs, he's very different. And
Okay.
he doesn't play like he plays very unique. Despite having like Shoto like tools, he plays very unique, and because you don't use him the same way, and I think that has merit. I think you should not
Yeah.
like create a character with no inputs as a way of just making another character that has inputs with no inputs. You should
Hmm.
try to use the unique like challenges of no inputs as their own character.
He's
It's
more so a
different way of design.
subversion.
Hmm?
I got you. He's like a subversion of the Street Fighter formula
Yeah,
rather
like
than its natural conclusion.
yeah, he's definitely
Oh,
a subversion. He goes against like many of like the principles of like a regular Shoto type character.
that makes sense.
It's interesting.
That is interesting. I'd never heard of him.
Yeah, he's he's Street Fighter Five original character, but
Nice.
yeah, he's pretty cool, and they've used that like the two button thing again with a character named Falk, which is a zoner, with no inputs. But she plays
Hmm.
very differently, and she's not very good, but she has a very different way of like of the way she's designed.
Huh.
She focuses on special moves a whole lot less, and her way of like zoning has to do a lot more with normals. Because her like special move projectiles are very slow and they need setup.
Ah, got you.
So you're like doing a lot of poking instead of like directly fireball and anti-air like a regular Street Fighter zoner would.
Hmm.
So they do it in that way.
Huh. So not only could you have a no input character of that flavor, but you can have a different one.
Yeah,
I didn't know there was one, let alone two.
yeah, it's pretty cool how there's two and they both take on like a standard form of character, like a
Uh
standard
huh.
like the design archetype, but handle
Yeah.
it in very different ways. Like that way of subversion is pretty interesting, and I like it a lot.
Yeah. I think it probably stands to say that inputs are um, kind of like at the core of fighting games because you have these weird kind of characters that don't
Hmm.
really fit the mold when you don't have them.
Yeah,
Um, are there the only fighting game I can think of with like no inputs is Dive Kick? I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've heard of it. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I mean it's minimalist, right, to the
Hmm.
core, but there's definitely no inputs.
Yeah,
There's I think there's like a movement joystick and a button, right?
yeah. It's two buttons, so it's like jump and a kick, right? So
Yeah,
it's simple as that. But it still keeps like core like principles of fighting games like spacing
yeah.
and like space control. So
Hmm.
it's
You can
interesting.
have a fighting game without inputs, but your fighting game benefits from having them. You could say.
Yeah, I'd say that like there's this other game that has no inputs that I could think of, which is Fantasy Strike, and that game is very different. It's a grounded based game. There's like three buttons, and it's pretty interesting. But like combos are like not really a thing.
Hmm.
Uh, it's they're very short combos. You have a special move button, like a super button, and like stuff like that. It's very interesting the way they handle stuff, but uh,
Huh.
as a trade off for not having inputs and overall just like being more simple as a whole, they like the core principles of fighting games are they are directly there. Spacing is needed
Okay.
at, even at a very low level. Like space, you will see people spacing a whole lot more in lower ranks than you'll see in like a game like Street Fighter.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The
Really.
it's easier to understand how like how design works at
Mm-hmm.
at that basic level in a game
Yeah.
like
Once
that.
everything's stripped away.
Yeah, well, yeah. Like once your tools are gone from you, you quickly like understand like how important this stuff is.
The raw mechanics.
Yeah,
Huh. Huh. All
it's a
right.
very interesting way of like going about things, and I think and that was like the game's intention, and I think it like really worked. Uh, like I saw people like improve faster in other games due to having to understand like how the game works faster. Like it's pretty cool like how it ended up working out, but definitely very like interesting
Yeah.
and probably like not my preferred way of design, but it's definitely very interesting.
It's good to look at,
Yeah,
if
it
not to play.
yeah it gives
I've
merit.
never tried it, so I can't really speak on it.
Oh,
But
it's
it's
free,
interesting to talk
so
about. Huh.
yeah,
I could give it a spin.
yeah, it's interesting. Like the the systems that the game gives you, like even in the basic tutorial, tell you like how important like spacing is directly. Uh, ship damage and damage in general is they're intertwined in a very interesting way. It's hard to explain without like saying it, but like the game, it gives you the core principles of fighting games way faster, and it still has
Hmm.
depth in other areas, which is interesting.
Yeah. If you have nothing else, you have to really rely on your fundamentals.
Yeah, it's very like core fundamental game in a lot of ways. I appreciate it for that.
Yeah. A little less technically demanding, at the
Hmm.
very least.
Yeah, I think like the idea of like technically demanding in a fighting game is very important to like the core of input as a whole, because to me execution is a very important part of fighting games, and I don't think you can like take that away from many fighting games, because like uh execution is cool when you see it happen, right? And it also like gives you something to work to work towards. So like already like doing a quarter circle forward is execution in a way, but like harder execution is like doing a one frame link to that special move. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like that's
No, I see.
yeah. I think it's hard to explain, but I to me at least yet I haven't seen a game do like a game that has no inputs do execution well as a game like I haven't seen it do as well as a game that has inputs.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that you have to like take away when you have no inputs, or at least like limited inputs.
Yeah. Definitely. You limit your game a lot.
Yeah,
You you end up playing the same things, right?
yeah,
And no matter how diverse your roster is, if you have a very like basic set of moves and combos and neutral and all that, you're gonna play the same games over and over.
yeah. Like I'd say like a game like Smash probably does it the best, because even though the games like I've gotten like simpler in terms of like in terms of like a pure like raw execution level, due
Hmm.
to like less things like there's less things you have to worry about in Ultimate in comparison to Melee.
Yeah,
There's still
definitely.
execution, and you can still see variation in the way players play with a lot of characters in Ultimate. So there's some characters that they have like one like pretty hard coded way of playing,
Yeah.
and then there's other characters that have like a lot more variation, like Joker or something, right? Like you can
Hmm.
look at like Leo Joker, and you can look at like Ned Joker or something, and you will see difference in play.
Definitely. Versus everybody's gonna play Young Link the same way for the most part.
Yeah, like with like maybe some like harder combos in between, but like it's kind of like the same like basic way of like of playing.
Hmm.
So I think that's a good thing. I don't think every character needs to have like incredibly like I don't think every character in a fighting game needs to have like super crazy variation. That's not like necessarily needed, but I think that
Yeah.
variation. I think that variation for some characters definitely like works. I tend to
Definitely.
like characters that have like more tools than other characters. Even if they are harder, and also like tend to like games that have more tools, but it's not needed in order to have a good fighting game. I'd say.
No, it's not necessary, but it couldn't hurt
Yeah,
usually.
that usually doesn't hurt. The issue is like when you try to like balance something based on like being like crazy hard because eventually someone might learn it, right? So you can't make it like too crazy powerful, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
Like when I was talking to other people about how they feel in fighting games, they thought like balancing a move based off of like how difficult it was to input is backwards and is a archaic form of design. And I can definitely see that.
Hmm.
I think nowadays we see that a lot less as things have gotten like more like toned down and like more like standardized. But
Hmm.
things definitely like were broken in the past. Like I play a lot of Tekken, and the character I play
Yeah.
has a one frame special move that changes their entire gameplay. And if you hit the one frame special move, it's not only unpunishable, but it's a plus on block launcher that sends the
Oh
opponent
man.
back on block.
Oh no.
So it's still your turn, right? But it's in trade off for it is a one frame input. Even then, it still sounds very good.
No risk.
There is risk because if you whiff you're out there for a pretty decent amount of time,
Oh, okay. Sure.
and you can also directly counter it by sidestepping right because it's a 3D game.
It
So
it do be 3D.
yeah, so I think that way is definitely interesting. But before, like especially like when it was like first introduced, it was insanely broken. It like there
Hmm.
was there was pretty much no counterplay to it.
You just get hit.
Yeah, like you're either blocking the entire game or you're getting lucky. And as they've thought about it more and toned it down more, it's definitely like gotten better, and it's a very balanced move now. It's very
That's
balanced, and
good.
there's definitely like
That's good.
hard negatives for it, but like the idea of like balancing something based on execution was definitely like very popular back in the day, and now you see it a whole lot less. Like supers
I
used to be crazy powerful on block and on hit, and now they're a lot weaker.
I could see that. Like because if you have this move that is super hard to pull off, right?
Hmm.
But it's just a command input, but maybe it's, super long. But if you pull it off, it's insane.
Hmm.
People will just learn to do it.
Yeah, like
It
they're
will be
they're always
hard,
gonna want to
but
learn.
people will just learn to
Hmm.
like people that play fighting games will do anything.
Yeah,
That's one thing I've learned. They will learn anything that they have to be like to have an advantage. So I think balancing a move by end lag or damage or how it is on block is just a better system
I,
than
I
how hard
agree.
the input is.
I agree.
A hard input it has height, like
Hmm.
everyone's seen Evo moment, or at
Yeah.
least everyone in these circles has seen Evo moment,
Hmm.
and it's height.
Very.
Like just I don't know, just human performance and execution, timing, all that. It's a staple of fighting games, so
Yeah, like
I'm
I
definitely
think that
for
like
it too.
I think that clip like it shows like what fighting games like are like more than like anything. It really shows like the appeal of fighting games, why people love them so much. It just shows it all off
Hmm.
in like one clip, and it's
Yeah,
great.
that is maybe the greatest video of all time.
Yeah, and I think like as like we've changed like our core like gameplay principles, it's like since that day, or like since games before that, like before and after that, like I think we're not necessarily like losing it, but we are definitely changing the way fighting games are designed as a whole. Like games nowadays are getting a whole lot more simple,
Hmm.
with a lot of the
Definitely.
things they are. Uh,
Yeah,
I think it may hurt, but I think we are. I think this is like a different like a period of change in fighting games, and I think eventually
I agree.
things will go back to like what we thought, but like they'll still be different at the same exact time. Like
Yeah,
A game I've been like really looking at is Guilty Gear Strive because I'm a huge fan of Guilty Gear. I like Exert and Axon Core quite a bit, and
For sure.
I've played them for quite a while. But Strive like changes those games completely. Like air combos, they're gone, right? Like air movement, whole lot less powerful. You're a whole lot slower on the ground, and
Sure.
ground movement is way more important. But like those, it changes core aspects of Guilty Gear and keeps them and also changes like other aspects. So it removes some aspects, changes aspects, or it
Hmm.
keeps some aspects. And I think as much as it may suck, I think eventually it will get better. And I still want things changed, obviously, but I think the course correction that we're seeing in fighting games as a whole is definitely interesting, even if it may not be the best right now.
Yeah, I think an interesting analogy would be like arena shooters. You know,
Hmm.
like Quake and all
Oh
that.
yeah, arena shooters.
Um,
I'm a fan of them.
Quake had like rocket jumping
Hmm.
and like these really tough movements and like strafe jumping and all that stuff, right?
Yeah,
And then Overwatch comes out and you don't rocket jump, you press shift,
yeah,
right? You know,
with Kara.
strafe move, you press E.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's interesting to look at because Overwatch was huge, right?
Yeah.
But the movement really wasn't like satisfying in
Hmm.
in a weird way. You know, pressing shift and flying in the air is like it's cool, but
Yeah, it's
if you
cool.
didn't like shoot a rocket at your feet and do it yourself, it's a bit less cool, right?
Yeah.
So I think that you could see kind of how Overwatch affected movement shooters,
Hmm.
and their inputs
Yeah.
could be an interesting way to think about how command inputs are being like looked at in terms of fighting.
Yeah. Like core like principles of design that we've known for years are changing now, and it's definitely interesting. I won't say whether it's good or bad, but at least for fighting games, it's definitely interesting, and I'm curious
Yeah.
to see like how things are like 10 years from now. I enjoy movement shooters quite a bit, and they're like coming back a little bit, but like they're coming back in like more different ways. Like I
Hmm.
think like some of the biggest games like that are like crazy like movement shooters are like games like Titanfall,
Yeah.
and like I guess now Hyperscape. That game is a pretty big like it's like a arena shooter battle royale.
I was just playing it.
Yeah,
Like
it's
honestly, like 3 hours ago.
yeah it's definitely
Again,
very
you have your jumps and you have some like difficult movement, but
hmm
you just press E or Q.
yeah
And I think after Overwatch hit the scene, uh, harder movement is just not something that is really mainstream anymore.
yeah and honestly that really sucks. Like Titanfall 2 is it's a game that has like some like it probably has like probably the hardest like movements in a modern day shooter like as we
Hmm.
know them right now. But compared to like some of like the previous games that we've known in like the movement shooter genre, it's still nowhere near as close.
Yeah.
You can still go very fast in Titanfall. You can still do pretty crazy movements, but like it's no Quake
Hmm.
3, right?
Yeah,
I think there's
I
definitely a
agree.
place for movement shooters. I think there's definitely a place for like hard execution in fighting games. I think
Definitely.
things like pretzel emotions don't need to go away completely. I think things like crazy long like input strings are definitely like something that don't need to go away. But I think the way that we look at them and the way that we implement them needs to change a little bit.
Yeah. Uh, if we don't really think about it and we just kind of take what comes out, it
Hmm.
could definitely get overwatched. We could
Yeah,
just
like
have
definitely. I
your Smash specials, which is I play Smash. I don't mind it.
hmm
I find my difficult tech and other things, but um, I think it should exist.
I agree. Like I think like the way like Smash like handles like the Shotos and Terry inputs, right? I think that's a very like good way of designing it. But you can't apply that to like every game. Just like how you
Hmm.
can't apply like cooldowns to every fighting game. Like Granblue has it.
Hmm.
You have to like look at what your game is, and you have to find the best system for your game if you want to go in that way of simplification.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of work, and takes and it's eventually it's going to make someone angry because it's different by design. But I don't think it has to be bad necessarily, and I think you can still have that hard execution still with that like simple stuff. Like Grand Blue, for example, like there's a grappler character like Zangief, and she has a 360 input, or just like every other character in the game, you can do the one button thing. But if you do the one button, you have one of the longest cooldowns in the entire game.
Okay,
I forget like the exact amount of time for it, but it's pretty
but
decently long.
it's long.
Yeah,
You're out
yeah.
for sure.
But like you're not doing inputs like you're not doing like 360s all the time in fighting games, right? So
Hmm.
it's that trade off that you make in your head, or like you can choose to like do a one button DP with full invincibility if you want to in Grand Blue, but again it has a cooldown on it, and I think that way of design is definitely interesting. Like
Yeah.
even if you do an EX move in Grand Blue with an input, there's a cooldown, but it's shorter. The cooldown for an EX move with input and no input is the exact same, but it's making you have these decisions like do I want to spend meter here, knowing I can't use this move for this amount of time when I might need it or something like. Do I want to end this combo with an EXDP for the damage and for the corner, or do I want to keep this DP in case I get knocked down and I want a way out? That's not super. It's these decisions that you're having to constantly make that I think are good, and they come out of like they come out of a system that you can tell was thought about for quite a bit, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting like to think about what might happen as newer fighting games come out, like
Hmm.
what they'll choose to do. Like maybe you do less damage, or like you said, maybe you have less end lag.
Hmm.
Maybe it's not as fast, right? Like I don't know. It
Yeah,
could be anything.
it
We
really
could
could be anything.
only time can tell. But I do hope we see more of that because options are always good to have, right?
Yeah, options are great, and I
And
think options. Mhm.
I don't want command inputs to go away. Pretty
Yeah,
much.
I same. I think options are the way to go here. Like I think eventually we'll get to a point where every fighting game has options, but they just handle it in a very different way, and
Hmm.
that'll be the new normal for a while. Like not every game will have simple inputs, right? But I could see a world where like the major games like Street Fighter, Tekken, like Mortal Kombat, like all have like simple inputs, but they're handled in a different way.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like
I can see that.
like Mortal Kombat inputs like they're already pretty simple, but I don't think the game's like when you get into like stuff like player base and like why fighting games like aren't as popular. I don't think inputs existing is the reason why, because like games like Mortal Kombat like sell very well. Like Mortal Kombat 11
Yeah,
was it was in like the top 5 best selling games of last year, and it's a fighting
yeah,
game, right?
yeah, definitely.
And fighting games are an inherently niche genre, but it's not because they had inputs that make them the way they are. It's because the package that surrounds them, I think,
Yeah,
is not the
that's well
same
said.
for all people.
There's limitless barriers to playing a fighting game, but
Hmm.
like when you market it towards a casual audience, like growing up, I played a lot of Mortal Kombat with my brothers,
Hmm.
and we weren't good at all,
Yeah,
but it was really fun,
yeah,
you
it's
know.
the
And I
fun.
think that could be attributed to Mortal Kombat success. Like even like 9-year-old me could do reptiles like quarter circle forward,
Hmm.
X square, and all those, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's it's always good to have your combination of hard and like easy inputs, right? Like
Hmm.
those, and then if you're interested, you can learn the weirder characters with the harder ones, or your own characters harder inputs, right?
Yeah, yeah,
As long as
like
there's something for everyone, it's just a recipe for success. I feel for a fighting game.
yeah. Like I'm thinking of like the Riot fighting game and like how it's gonna work, because I'm going to assume it's gonna be a free to play fighting game, uh, with like free characters and like the bare necessities. But I think you don't sell a fighting game with training mode and online ranked to most people. I would buy a fighting game that only has like training mode and like ranked and like on and like online with it. But
Mm-hmm.
to like the general public, you're not gonna sell that to a lot of people. I mean, Street
Yeah.
Fighter Five only launched with training mode, a bare bones story mode, and online, and that was it for like a good like 6 months. That was it. There was no big story mode. There was no arcade mode even, and the
Wow.
game underperformed for that because you take away those things that casual players like. People that have zero interest in learning how to play these games, and they like them only because of like other things like the characters and like just casual fun.
Mm-hmm.
In these games start to sell a whole lot less. Like
Yeah.
you like a game like Smash, right? Like Smash gets sold based on like the characters and like all the big single player modes, right? Like Ultimate has like World of Light and like create like the classic mode and everything, and like just fun casual stuff. It's not selling itself based on like the new like parry mechanic to like everybody. No one, a lot of people just don't care about that stuff, you know.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's true.
mm-hmm,
It's when you have like a company that's making a game, they're going to want to sell it to as many people as possible.
mm-hmm,
And if the way they do that is by making it easy, that's what they'll do.
yeah,
Right? That's what Overwatch did,
mm-hmm,
and it sold really well again. So it'd be interesting to see if um, we have a lot more fighting games where they kind of take the Smash route of keeping things surface level very easy,
yeah,
and like the harder stuff is like kind of deeper in the game.
yeah. Like that's definitely like what kept me playing certain games like Tekken. Like at a very casual level, Tekken is very simple and like you don't have to do like super like hard stuff to do like something to do stuff that looks cool at a basic level.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you do like two punches in if like in like Tekken 7, if you do like a move that's like two punches, it has like a cool animation on it. Uh, that has like the screen zooms in for a second and it shows like impact, something cool, right? But
Mm-hmm.
at a high level, that move is pretty slow, and you can easily react and parry or sidestep it or something, or even
Yeah,
just counter hit it. Like
yeah,
that variation that definitely helps. Like I don't think you can sell a esports fighting game like you can sell an esports shooter.
mm-hmm.
It's definitely like not the same, and I think that's definitely like where a lot of companies have like fallen. Like Capcom, they want this like
Yeah.
Street Fighter Five was sold as an esports game, for $60, and it just did not
No,
work.
you can't have it all.
Yeah,
You can't have it all, Capcom.
like fighting games can't just do that, and it's because the average person is not gonna want to sit down and learn some foreign mechanics, uh, out of nowhere. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
I think free to play fighting games are gonna be happening a whole lot more in the future, and I think
Yeah,
that's definitely gonna be interesting. I really do wonder like how Riot is gonna change the entire industry with that game for better
yeah,
or for worse. I'm very curious.
yeah. Definitely. I'm curious too. Only time can tell, right?
Yeah, like it's gonna come out the gate with good net code. It's gonna be free, and it's gonna be backed by Riot Games. So
Mm-hmm.
there's gonna be tons of money in it.
Definitely something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, like
All right, I think I'm gonna have to run. I'm
oh,
sorry.
it's alright. Well, that was a great like
Any
40
any, any other
minutes.
closing thoughts?
Uh, I think fighting games uh are cool, and I think inputs are cool. But
Fighting games are in fact cool.
yeah,
I just did some research and they are in fact cool.
yeah, and I do think fighting games will change in the future, for better or for worse. And I'm very curious to see where they go.
Yeah, definitely. I'm I'm very interested as well.
Hmm. Well, all
All right,
right. I think that's
that was
about it.
fun, dude.
That was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, appreciate it. Bye.
I hope you do well in
Oh,
your project,
yeah.
and I hope you enjoy JoJo and and all that. All right,
Hmm. All right, bye.
later.